Okay people, hello and welcome back to part 58. So what's going on here? So basically probably once a week I get somebody emailing me or messaging me saying that they want to know how to hook the fuel injection and the ignition up to the motogadget system. So I did some electrical drawings and I emailed them out to people, and I made a slight mistake on one of those electrical drawings where I missed a 12 volt power supply, which this unit here needs. So what I thought I would do is a super in-depth video on how it all works and how I've done it. Now this might not work for everybody. This is purely for a 84 K100. You may have a later model one with different wiring, but this is how I've done it. It works for me. Yeah, it could be made better, but yeah, like I say, it works for me, so I'm sticking with it. Okay, so we'll start looking at the fuel injection system all by itself and how it works. We'll start with the major components, and then we'll move on to how we connect it to the motogadget. Okay, so this is our fuel injection module here. Everybody's seen these. I've put mine in a little aluminium box under the seat. It used to slide in here. You may mount yours somewhere else, but that is where I have mounted mine. So this is our fuel injection. This controls the 4 injectors and the fueling. Okay, so this is our igniter. This controls the coils and when to fire the spark plugs. What tells this to fire? Let's go have a look now. Okay, so behind this cover here on the front of the engine are our Hall sensors. Let's whip this cover off and have a wee nosy. Okay, so these are our Hall sensors. We have one at the top, one at the bottom. The centre part is on the crankshaft of the engine and spins. So these two sensors pick up exactly what position the crankshaft is in. So yeah, this will tell the igniter or the ignition when to fire the spark plugs at the right position of the engine. Okay, so this big aluminium box here, this is basically a mass airflow sensor. This tells the fuel injection, the density of the air and how much air is flowing through. There's two things in here. There's a little element which is heated up, and that makes a resistance, and as the air flows over it, it cools it down, and that resistance changes, tells the fuel injection how much density is in the air, how much is flowing past. There's also a little flap in here which opens and closes as the air speeds up, and that also tells this how much air is flowing in. Okay, so this here is our idle switch. This basically tells the fuel injection whether your throttle is fully closed or in the open position. Okay, so I don't know if you can see, but in behind that little triangle there is the vacuum switch. Now the job of the vacuum switch was to change the fueling map of the fuel injection when a certain RPM range and vacuum was detected, but they found that it was so unreliable and rubbish, they got rid of it on later models. So it was really only on this early model K100s that vacuum switch is there. So if you don't have a vacuum switch, don't panic, because they got rid of them because they were rubbish. Okay, so this is the big bundle of spaghetti that I got rid of. Why did I get rid of it? Because basically the motogadget can take care of what half of this stuff does, and we don't need any of that rubbish anymore. That's all going to be taken over by the motogadget unit. So yeah, cool, let's carry on. Okay, so what wires do we actually have to hook up to get the motogadget system working with this fuel injection and this ignition? How do we figure that out, And what do we do? So if I go back to one of my earlier videos where I started the wiring, and I'll throw some footage in now. So that bundle there with the correct wires put to positive, the correct ones put to negative, that should get the bike to run. He says with confidence. Okay, so this drawing I've done here might look pretty complicated, but it's quite simple. This is our M unit, this is our ignition output, and we feed 1, 2, 3, 4 cables. We have a green and a red, which is the larger one, which goes to terminal 9 of the fuel injection module. We have a green and a yellow, which is a large cable, which feeds the coils. We have a green and a white, which goes to the fuel pump. We have a green and a yellow, which goes to pin 10 on the ignition module. This one here, this black and yellow, I hooked this up on my bike, but I don't believe I hooked it up on Nikki's bike, which I did in the last video. So I'm unsure if this one's actually needed or not. Might just pay to connect up anyway, not a problem. I'll put a link to all my drawings where you can have a look at them, or you just email me or message me and I can send them to you in a PDF format. Okay, so newsflash, this one here, this black wire with a yellow stripe, which goes to pin number 6 on the ignition module, that has to be connected to start. I've just been talking to a guy on Instagram, Christian Alejandro, I think is how you pronounce his name. Anyway, he's been having some issues with his K100 getting it going, and between the two of us we've nutted it out, and yeah. We got that bad boy fired into life, and we believe it was this cable here that was missing, black with a yellow. Cool. So this is my cable here, which comes out of my ignition output. It comes around, and I've done a solder and heat shrink join, and here's my 4 cables that we just talked about. Green with a red stripe, now green with white stripe, green with yellow, yada yada. 4 cables connected onto the output. Here's our black with a yellow stripe. This is the one that I said I was unsure if I need, and that's into our start. Okay, so I've also had some people ask me why I run the starter solenoid still, purely just for a safety reason really. They say that these 2 outputs here can pump out a fair bit of amps, but I'm running this cable down here to my starter solenoid, which is in this box here. Now let's talk about a starter solenoid or a starter relay or a starter contactor, for those who don't actually know what they do, how they work. So let's talk about that for a second. Okay, so I've got a selection of relays and contactors here. This is an automotive one off of the BMW. This is very common to what you might find in a car. I think this one did the horn or the high beam or something. This one here we're going to use because it's see-through and we can actually see what's going on. So how does it work? This little white thing that you can see here is a coil of wire. You put power on that, and it makes a magnetic field which pulls the switch across. So I'll put power on this one and we should see it work. Okay, so why do we use these? Basically we can use a tiny little switch to operate this coil, which will make these contactors do the job of a big switch. So we can use a little tactile switch on our bars for our starter motor, and we could use contactors like this to start our starter motor, which is high current draw, which that little switch on the bars would never be able to handle. So yeah, we have all different sorts, but basically that is how a contactor, relay or a starter solenoid works. Cool. Okay, so the final thing I want to touch on before I finish the video. A few people asked me why am I using the coolant fan to be turned on and off manually from the motogadget. I think it's this button here. A little bit of laziness on my part. I haven't really had an issue with the bike temperature creeping up too high. When I'm riding along, it's at a nice steady temperature. Now I believe this is the stock relay that operated the coolant fan. I just haven't really gotten around to nutting it out, and to be fair, it's going to be such a tight squeeze in there, and I didn't want to stick it anywhere else. For me, just pressing the button if I'm stuck at an intersection or traffic lights or whatever for too long, and I see the temperature creeping up on the display, I just turn the fan on manually, and then I turn it back off again once I get moving. Maybe one day I'll get round to doing something with this. Might even pull it to bits and see what's inside here. See if it's a tiny little circuit board or if I can jam this somewhere. But for the time being, like I say, it works for me. So I'll just, yeah, stick with it. Cool. Okay people, well I'll leave this video here. Hopefully this has shed some light for you people and how I've done it. Like I say, this works for me. I've been riding the bike around for 6 months now and I've had no issues. Again, I'm not a mechanic, I'm not a BMW technician expert. I'm an electrician by trade, so wires are my thing, but I've never really sort of delved into anything like this before, so this has been a learning curve for me, and what I've done seems to work. If anybody has any better ideas, I'm all ears. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Keep tuned. Summer's here and I'm going to be out on this thing riding around, so I might do some videos of my escapades on the road. Okay, out of here.